All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us yet again for another lovely computer literacy seminar hosted by Information Technology and the Center for Data Science. My name is Caitlin Moats, and I am the IT project manager here on campus. And today we're here to talk to you about the basics of cybersecurity. This topic has been created entirely by our student team, and Kobe is going to be the one to deliver this seminar. So go ahead, Kobe, and take it away.
Hello, everyone. So we all know the world of cybersecurity is like a confusing world at first. The word gets thrown around a lot. Everybody's worried about it. But what really is cybersecurity? So to start off, let's talk about the main purpose of cybersecurity. In one sentence, I will say cybersecurity is the maintenance of integrity, availability, and confidentiality of a system. A system can be your personal computer, a file server, a phone book, anything that kind of lives in a software sense and also has physical hardware attached to it needs cybersecurity. So to define integrity, it makes sure that systems run at a given speed and perform the needed tasks properly. Availability makes sure that systems can be accessed and are available to the needed users and services that rely upon them. And the reason I say services is because not all systems are purely human to human interaction. Some are just based between computers, and if one of them stops working, the whole chain might stop working. And then confidentiality makes sure that no person or computer that is not supposed to have access to the system gets access to the system. So maintaining these three things is what cybersecurity as a field is encompassed in. So moving on, I want to talk about the main two categories of cybersecurity. First, we've got hardware security, which includes physical security, like physical devices like this laptop right here, credentialing, like your passwords, your access to your physical locations, along with users. I'll go more into that in a second. Social engineering, physical device insertion, and then on the software end, we have quite a few buzzwords actually. We got viruses, botnets, kind of putting them together, ransomware, cryptojacking, and bloatware, and then vulnerabilities, which I will touch on last, but kind of encompass everything. So to start off, we're going to talk about physical security in a hardware sense. It is essential to keep the physical security of your system assets perfect. What that means is basically make sure that no one that is not supposed to work on your system ever gets access to the systems. It is a very looked over part, and people often take it for granted, but it's equally as foreign as anything else, because if you have physical access to the system and database, it also practically gives you full access to the system and database, knowing if you know the tricks and tips on how to get into it. It kind of involves understanding like how physical locks work, like lock picking and other aspects of it, along with disaster recovery, because physical security does not only mean keeping people away, it also means keeping disasters away or preventing any loss of data from disasters. And basically, it serves to keep the physical integrity of the systems, keeping them running, keeping them available, and keeping them confidential all in one. And it is a very important part of cybersecurity. For example, if this laptop, I were to just leave it outside the TPS here, I trust our UW students, but if someone had malicious intention, they could easily open it up, plug a hacking device to the USB in, and probably within 15 minutes gain access to everything I have on it. And that would not be a good representation of physical security. As such, I keep it in my backpack and close to my personnel at all times. So kind of a little example there for physical security. Moving on, we have credentialing. I kind of divided it into two parts. So first part, I'm just going to talk about passwords. So credentialing involves understanding cryptology and safe credentialing practices. We're going to first go over cryptology. Cryptology basically is the study of how cryptographs and everything works. So encryption comes in there, your password lengths come in there, your the way you have your system set up in the sense of how they check everything comes in there. But basically, to boil it down, your password is your system is only as safe as your password is. If you put your password as 123, someone could probably break into that within Whereas if you put your password as something long with added in apostrophes or @ symbols, hashtags, any interchange of symbols, it exponentially raises the time it takes to brute force into it. And brute force in this sense is we're basically guessing what the password is. A hacking computer will try and go through a bunch of different sequences. It'll try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then just go through the whole list. And as it gets longer, the longer time it will take because there's more and more numbers and letters to check. So in a sense, a longer password can even double or triple or even 10 times the amount of time it will take brute force just one simple password. So having a long dated nice password can make sure that your systems are never compromised in terms of a password sense. So first, there's kind of a demo if you guys want to check it out on your phones or on your PCs. It's called "How Strong Is My Password?" I'll have Caitlin put in a weak password. Let's do ABC. So instantly, you can see. Now let's add ABC @ 1, 2, 3, and you can see it went from instantly to about 22 seconds. Now if we keep adding on some characters to this, and you can see how it exponentially gets harder and harder for the computer to guess or brute force your password. And this is the basic sense of cryptology: is you want to have a strong password so that a computer would take a billion years to brute force and even with amazing amounts of power. Like passwords are really hard to crack once they get into these lengths because you have to test for every single different combinations of letters, numbers, and special characters. So kind of moving on now, back over to our slides. Credentialing, I'm now going to talk about safe credentialing management. That's kind of your users. You don't want any empty users or empty accounts in there with unsafe passwords. So like, let's just say I created a user on my computer called random and I didn't set a password to it. That means if someone first, you would have to get past physical security, but that sometimes can be mitigated through online practices. And if they get to my computer and see that random is an account, they can easily log into that account and perform different malicious activities. So in a server-wide sense, you wouldn't want anybody having access or any account having access when it's not supposed to. What that kind of means is if someone gets fired, you want to remove their account within a week. If someone from IT gets fired, per se, this is kind of a practice in the industry I've heard, is they often will remove their accounts almost immediately because they hold a lot of power over the systems. So in that sense, you kind of want to look at it as if that someone isn't supposed to have access, their account shouldn't be there either. And there shouldn't be any empty accounts that kind of just stay there just to be accessed. And there's been a few instances recently where we have seen that on servers, big servers with empty users, hackers were able to get access to those accounts and do malicious activities on those servers. So it's just safe practice to make sure no empty accounts stay, and then every account that you do have has a safe password. I just showed you. So moving on from credentialing, we have social engineering. Kind of like the biggest part that nowadays people have to worry about. Using psychology and lack of end user knowledge, a social engineer attack is basically social manipulation into giving up credentials or some other kind of information that could lead to credentials. So, for example, you click on a malicious email, a phishing email. I'll go more into that in a second. And they ask you to answer a set of questions. Now, with that set of questions, they can probably cause an account reset on, let's just say, your bank account, because they asked a certain set. They asked a certain set of questions, and they knew what kind of pattern most people follow. So, in that kind of sense, social engineering is very powerful. They don't even have to brute force or even hack anything per se. All they have to do is manipulate you as a person. So, I'll give an example as a phishing email. We're gonna Google some random address that claims to be Google email you. They say that if you fill out this form, we're gonna give you $100 in Google Play credit. And in that form, they might ask for your password. Okay, you might not give that, but you might give your date of birth, your account email and maybe a security question or two answer in there. That's common. And using that, what they can do is they can access your account using those credentials and either change up your password or access it completely and do malicious activities. So if, as I said, it also depends on the lack of end user knowledge. So if you know better as what phishing attacks are, what are they looking for, and not clicking suspicious emails, you will probably be fine. But it is a very big part, especially we tend to see this with older people. They tend to fall for these social engineering attacks much more as they're more trustworthy and they have less technical knowledge. But even someone as me could fall for it if the right circumstances were there to be on it. So it's purely just how well a person can manipulate you socially and how they can get credentials out of you. So that's one of the biggest parts of cybersecurity nowadays. And the last, I kind of talked about it. It's one of the rarest, but it's one of the most solidified methods. It goes hand in hand with physical security. It's called physical device insertion. So let's just say this is a pretty unassuming little USB that you would think is a dongle for a mouse. But what I can do is I can insert a chip in here that as soon as you plug it in, it doesn't need to have a lot of memory. It doesn't even need to look big or like the USB. It can be plugged in and a remote program can run that will take over access of all my computer. It's as simple as that. And we have seen this happen again. It was kind of where the first malware happened. So talking about that scenario in a sense, it was a single USB was plugged into a single computer, and through some vulnerabilities, which I will talk about later, they noted that this virus had spread to over 80% of the computers in the given country. And that was just based on one single USB insertion. So think about what it could do to a personal device of yours. So it's like the fastest way to gain access to a system, but also hardest because you have to go through physical security, you have to go through social engineering, and you also kind of have to go through credentialing if you need to. All of these things kind of come together to make this one of the rarest, but this is one of the most dangerous single methods of security that breach of security that you can have. So as a tip, don't plug in USBs you don't know, please, and kind of make sure that only people you trust, even then, only trust yourself in a sense to plug in stuff to your computer and make sure that nothing ever malicious gets on there. So now moving on, we got one of the biggest buzzwords, which is viruses. These are right now, this is kind of what everything I've just talked about relies upon. The USB you will insert will have a virus on it. It's just a set of code designed to take advantage of different vulnerabilities and different kinds of loopholes in your system and gain access to stuff it shouldn't have. They can be threats to not only system security, but integrity too. They can shut off systems. They can make sure that the systems run slow. They can also be hidden in the background. So as I talked about in the earlier example of one USB, they didn't even detect the virus until that virus had reached its destination. So in that sense, they can just lay low and act like any other piece of code to the unknowing eye while they do destruction or get to their set target. And they vary from a virus can make sure that a single program doesn't run on your computer, or a full system blackout which has full knowledge of everything you're doing on that computer. Both of these scenarios are likely and happen, and I'll talk more about them in a second when I get to the vulnerability section. That will be like the longer section about how viruses do what they do. Second biggest threat is going to be a botnet. So instead of the typical thing of attacking hardware or software to shut down a system, they'll just render a system unavailable by simply getting it off the network, making the network inaccessible. So what they do is, I have one computer here, my friend Daniel has another computer there, and both of these computers could have a botnet virus on it. What that does is, it will lay low for like 99% of the time. But then when the time comes, this hacker will say, okay, go ahead and send this information, this packet of information to this network. Let's just say the UW IT network, which Caitlin's involved with. Don't do this, please. But it will, what it will do is it will execute what we call a DDoS attack, denial of systems. And basically the way it works is your website or your servers are designed to handle a certain number of pings, maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000, maybe even 1,000,000. But what they're not designed to handle is a extremely vast amount, like maybe not, it wouldn't work on Google, but like a local Europe system, if it was hit by 5 million pings at once, would probably shut down. So in that sense, that's how kind of botnets work, is they have a large number of computers doing a very small task. But since the number is so large, it can be like 5 million, it can go up to maybe 10. Like Wikipedia was hit with one that was, I think, upwards of 100 million different bots that pinged it at once. It will cause a shutdown to the network. And basically what that does is it compromises the integrity of the system. You can't access it. Wikipedia was down for the whole day because of that. You can't access the system. The system is basically useless because the only way to interact with it would be in person. And as I said, one of the parts of physical security is that no one that's not supposed to change the system is supposed to have that access physically to the system. So Wikipedia isn't going to allow you to storm their data centers all of a sudden just because you need to know where was Cheetos made. You know, that's an example. And so there's different ways to prevent this, but it's also one of the most common attacks as well. You often see it in games, actually, where hackers or malicious people will go ahead and DDoS the server you're playing on. The server is designed to handle maybe 100 players, but all of a sudden it has 10,000 players contacting it at once. So it will cause the server to shut down, either an immediate loss or extreme lag. And I feel like if you play games, you might have come across this before, but that's kind of the analogy I want to set in your mind of. It's just made to make sure that you can't talk to something, like talk to the system. This is one of the newest ones, but also one of the most malicious ones. This is kind of, I don't want to say it in this sense, but this is how they try, moving on, sorry. This is kind of how they now want to make money. Instead of denying attacks or causing systems to shut down or deny access, what they'll do is they'll take control of your system through ransomware. So to first explain ransomware, it is a virus in a sense designed to block access to private data and files in return for ransom. So I just say over the network, I was playing a video game and this person got access to my IP. They can send a virus over the network, over the internet, Wi-Fi. And what that virus will do is it will show a little lock on my screen, like shown up here. This is actually kind of something that they would do. And it would say, give us 1 Bitcoin at this given address. Because of cryptocurrencies, this has become much more vigilant. And I've actually dealt with a situation where this has happened. And so they will basically lock down your data and encrypt it. Encryption meaning with cryptology, if just like I explained cryptology, that encryption will have maybe a 100-character key that is unbreakable. Nothing in this world can break that key right now in a good amount of time. So what they'll do is they'll ask for money in exchange for your private data and resume operations on your PC. The second kind of step to this is more malicious, I think, than say it's cryptojacking. They will install a virus again into your system, and what we'll do is instead of like blocking access or doing anything, it will just run in the background and it will mine for cryptocurrency. So it's just kind of using your computer as a miner on your power, your system, your speed. So you might see system slowdowns, you might see that certain programs aren't running. You might even see that you are paying much more in power bills and other aspects of that. And it kind of just in the background of making money off of your system for no benefit to you. And that's kind of the new thing that's been running. And this is also, many of these methods I'm talking about can also be, there's not just one aspect of security. They aren't just going to do social engineering. They may send you a social engineering email to get you to install this app, which then goes ahead and does crypto mining in the background. Like this is a chain of attacks that can use different parts of what I'm explaining here. And then last but not least is bloatware. And I wanted to include this fast because it's not malicious in a sense, but it's just very annoying and can be a very big security problem. If you ever bought a new laptop or bought something from a phone manufacturer, you can see that there's apps you can't delete, like McAfee. Everybody hates McAfee. Do I agree? Someone hates in the room. Yeah. And so what that can do is McAfee as a program is not very well designed right now, to be honest. It has a lot of vulnerabilities. I will touch that in a second. And what that can do is create a kind of backdoor through these uninstallable apps to gain access to the system in these different senses. So because these systems aren't usually very well implemented, they're buggy, they slow down your computer, and they're used to trick people into kind of buying services they never buy otherwise. I just consider it a very, it's a security threat. I'll just be straight with it. They're a security threat and they're not good for any system. So if you have bloatware on your system, I recommend uninstalling it. If you don't want an app, uninstall it, because that's just one more area that can kind of be exploited. And so you guys have seen me, I've mentioned vulnerabilities a lot in this talk. I apologize for not explaining them earlier, but I kind of wanted to get to them last because it's a very wide encompassing field. Everything has a vulnerability. Every piece of software, everything you're using. So, like for example, we have PowerPoint here. PowerPoint has a vulnerability. It can be accessed, it can be manipulated in a certain way to where they can gain access to either your system or just the app. And vulnerabilities are used to exploit most of the methods I mentioned above. A USB plugin, it probably has a virus that exploits the newest vulnerabilities in Windows. The phishing email that I did, it probably exploits the newest vulnerabilities found in Gmail's scanning system. And in a gist, they're kind of just bugs or oversight in a software, which would allow hackers or other malicious group to gain access to the software or underlying hardware/software. And again, they not only exist in every piece of software, but they exist in every piece of hardware as well. Like, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but Intel for like a few years had this vulnerability in their physical chip design called Spectre, where a hacker could go ahead and send a piece of code and Intel's processors would physically process it in a way that would run in your RAM, random access memory, in a small location, and it could do anything you wanted. And that's like something you can't even prevent with like a Windows update. That required like a whole chip chain. And that's why I want to say that these can also apply to printers, copiers, and routers. So the example I was presenting earlier, where that one USB infected not 80% systems. This was back in the Cold War in Iran, and what they did is they injected a virus into the computers. And the way that virus spread is by a vulnerability found in most printers in that country. Every printer would have that virus, and every computer connected to that printer would go out to those computers. So it may have started in a cafe in the middle of Bahrain. Baghdad, and then it moved over to what their final destination was, which was it was a nuclear processing plant. And what it did is shut down all operations in that plant, and the virus was supposed to find those specific machines that it was targeting inside that plant. So it kind of shows how dangerous these things can be, because that was just the first attempt. They've gone much worse now. Like, let's just say I have my computer, I go to a Starbucks, over the network, they send me a virus. That virus will never show its face to me ever until maybe I go over to Caitlin's office and plug into maybe the admin UW network. It will then realize it, send itself over the network, and then compromise UW systems. It's a very scary but real reality where you may not even touch anything, but you may be caused of millions of dollars of damages. So that's why it's kind of good practice to follow all of the things I've said. So to kind of show vulnerabilities as an example, I have another demo. This is called the CISA database. It shows CSVs, which are known vulnerabilities. The reason I'm comfortable sharing this is because known vulnerabilities are either being worked on or already patched. So that means that they're not very malicious anymore. So they kind of represent the minimal threat right now. And these are things that if you don't update, you may be subject to. So like, this is a lot of code we may not know. It's if you keep scrolling down, Caitlin, we will see maybe a program you do use on an everyday basis. Office right there. And what they can do is, where it allows local authenticated attack. Basically, what it means is they can get through Office and to your computer based on this little bug right here. Now it has been patched, but it's every day new vulnerabilities are coming out, and those vulnerabilities I'm going to talk more called 0 days. It's something that nobody in the industry knows. Basically, they don't know the bug exists yet. So that's kind of one field. Yeah, even Apple products actually. Apple actually pays some of the highest prices for you to find bugs and report it to them, because their software is so unisynchronous that a bug in your iPhone probably affects every single device in their lineup actually. So it's kind of understanding that it's not only like your Windows PCs that are affected, everything has vulnerabilities, everything has problems in it. So remaining safe, if we go to the last slide here. Remaining safe kind of just involves these few steps, but they're very important steps. Don't share passwords, don't click on suspicious links, don't open unknown, unwanted emails, and do not plug in foreign USBs. That is good for 90% of the population. Nobody's specifically coming after the common Joe for a lot of money or a lot of problems, unless you bring those problems to yourself in doing these things. And mainly, cybersecurity is here for you to make sure that your data and your privacy stays safe, but also the overall system privacies and overall system data stays safe. Everything you rely on from YouTube, Google, Microsoft, Apple's own infrastructure relies on these basic cybersecurity principles, and they make sure that every day that you have access to your data, nobody else gets access to your data, and you can access your data with the proper speed and functionality that you need. And that's kind of what cybersecurity is there for, making sure that everything has integrity, availability, and confidentiality. Thank you, guys.
So we wrapped up a little bit sooner than we normally do that. So I would like to open up the floor for any potential questions you might have for Kobe.
I can answer any questions you guys may have. I can even go deeper into a specific topic if you want right now. Anybody?
So it's great. Thank you very much for your presentation, and I can't imagine you. But all the things they said is scary. And at the end, you're controlling. There's so much we can do, but are we waiting or what? I mean, for somebody to attack us, how do you solve that problem?
Well, one of the ways you can help solve that problem is becoming a cybersecurity, going into the industry yourself, making sure that it's one of the growing industries actually. We have a shortage in workers there. So making sure you kind of step into the field and understand more. And if anybody CS major here, raise your hands. Also, in that, what you guys can do is understand cybersecurity principles and apply them in your code. When you're like coding your Java file, make sure that the bugs you might have that allow access to people that don't need access are solved. Kind of like code with a security mindset in hand. That may make something run slower, but it'll make sure in the future that even the products you are making are safe and secure, and they never find a vulnerability in them. And that's why Apple's so good about it. They hire engineers with kind of that kind of mindset, and that's why they not only pay some of the highest prices, but they also have some of the lowest number of vulnerabilities amongst their devices, because they code and they understand everything with that kind of mindset. But the average Joe, on the other hand, can probably, as I said, it is kind of a waiting game too. You can't do much other than the steps I said. But even then, most attacks and most problems are not targeted at you. They might be able to get maybe $100, maybe $1,000 out of you. But the real thing is, cybersecurity kind of relates to these bigger companies and bigger systems, and making sure they stay up and they stay running without problems, because that's when it starts costing not only the company money, but whenever a company gets charged money, it comes down to the consumer, and that kind of costs you money. You may pay $1,000 for your own personal data, but you may be paying extra thousands because Azure got hacked and all their data was lost, and now they need to recoup costs and get additional personnel, and that kind of gets passed down to the consumer. So it's kind of understanding this whole cycle, and where involved is you just making sure you practice safe cybersecurity habits and make sure that you have good understanding of what these issues are and how they can affect your day-to-day life. Any other questions?
Yeah, so like modern antiviruses, from what I've heard, it's like Windows Defender, for example, is like pretty robust these days, and traditional antivirus with malware aren't really as necessary.
So on a person-to-person basis, so let me say for the average person, I personally don't think they're needed. I do not give this as any sort of I don't give this as any sort of advice. This is my personal opinion. You may or may not follow it. I'd say don't follow it. But they're not needed as long as you practice safe habits. But if you have some like older people in your household, or if you have someone that doesn't understand the ins and outs of this as well, like just internet life, it's always good to have them, because what they make sure of is that everything coming through your system and everything going out of your system is all in check. But what they can't do is kind of prevent the more physical side. All they do is prevent more of the software side. Anything that kind of shows up on your screen, they can prevent, but nothing from the outside. So still practicing those physical security standards is good. But on the software side, having an extra antivirus layer is never going to hurt. It might slow down your system a little bit more, but it definitely will increase security. Windows Defender is very good, but again, vulnerabilities, as I said, Windows Defender can have those bugs, those glitches, which allows a program to get through it. So having a second program, which may not have that bug or vulnerability, double checking Windows Defender work is always good. I will say that. But honestly, based on the prices, I personally don't install them. But I say if you feel like you want them and it gives you an extra peace of mind when browsing the internet or performing your daily tasks, definitely get them. They're not a waste of money per se. They're just really case by case scenario. You need to judge if you want them.
How often are the databases updated? Like especially for like Windows Defender, do you know?
So those things, so basically the CSVs are only published once they've been patched or are being patched actively. And sometimes they come out of nowhere, like Black Hat. So I'll go into a little bit of explanation here more. There's 3 kinds of hackers per se. There's white hat, gray hat, and black hat. White hat is purely ethical. They are paid by companies to hack their systems to find vulnerabilities before someone else can. A gray hat may be someone like me sitting at home hacking the system, and I may decide, okay, I'll make more money by telling the company that this is a vulnerability rather than exploiting the vulnerability. Where on the other hand, I might find another vulnerability where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sell this vulnerability to the black market and kind of make money there. Do not recommend gray hat, and I totally do not recommend black hat. Black hats are purely malicious. All they do is find vulnerabilities to exploit them. They're kind of your more recently in the news you've been hearing, like the Russian hackers. Those are black hat hackers. They're mainly there for malicious purposes. They serve no integral purpose to the whole process at all. All they're doing is trying to shut down systems, make sure we're hurting in a software sense, and make sure that they can get money out of it. That's kind of their only goal. And so they're kind of like the robbers and thieves of our cyber world is black hat hackers. So I never recommend becoming one. I wouldn't even say recommend. I do not condone becoming one at all. Sorry. So, but in that sense, that's kind of where everything lies. So the way the CSVs are set up is mostly white hat hackers will find these vulnerabilities and report them to the companies, and then they'll upload them to the database. They're mainly there so that, let's just say I have this system. You can get an app which will scan your system and tell you all the vulnerabilities that exist upon it. I've done this before. It's relatively easy. And what it will allow you to do is go in and update those places, or maybe put in checks for that vulnerability. Whereas sometimes black hat hackers may exploit it, and in the process of fixing that exploitation, that malicious action, the fixers will find the CSV and then upload it, or sometimes they'll just black hat hackers will straight up upload it as kind of you can't fix this, you possibly can't fix this, so I'm just gonna put it on there to collect more models and still take care of it, so. It's like it's a unanimous database, anybody can upload it for any reason, but 90% of things on there are by companies. Who fix problems or are fixing the current problems, and they're kind of updated every day. As soon as they're notified and confirmed that they're a vulnerability, they're put onto the CSV database, they're really fast. Yeah, and that's kind of like the government sponsored database that's held there for everybody. There's more in-depth ones that kind of involve closer connection with companies that, like, if they're like UW, they might have access to like Microsoft's CSV list before the public gets to know it, because then we can implement, then UW can implement the fixes way before the public may even know of them, and do like preliminary actions to make sure they never get exploited. So that's kind of the answer to that.
Fantastic. Any other lingering remaining questions? All right, then let's just give Kobe another round of applause for doing a fantastic presentation. We're very thankful you were able to take time to do this. We're gonna have quite a bit of a break before our next presentation. It's gonna be on March 31st, because we're allowing for spring break and for the end of the quarter. I know that you guys are all stressed right now, as we discussed before this started. So we don't quite have our topic solidified on that, but it's looking like it's going to be cryptology. So if you were really interested in that little demo we showed of how you add more characters and different characters, how it complicated that password, that's kind of what we're looking about talking. So check that UWT line. You'll be seeing many emails from me in the coming weeks. But thank you again so much for joining us, and we will see you guys all at our next seminar.
Thank you guys for getting good on me and